Hello
Hi.
everyone, my name is Fiona. I'm a consultant paediatric occupational therapist and I'd like to welcome you all to video 2 question and answer segment of the sensory processing difficulties module course. I'd just like to do a little recap before we go into our questions, just kind of around from what would have been discussed in the modules that I would have done. So our senses are the foundation to all our learning. When our senses work well together, we are as individuals able to work, play and interact with our world, basically function on a day-to-day basis. For our children, good sensory processing is critical for all the areas of development. It helps our children have meaning and purpose on a daily basis. Good sensory processing helps them play, communicate, interact, have fun, engage and learn with their preschool environment. When the foundations of sensory processing are missing or not working as well as they should, the results will show up in many different ways. The result of poor sensory processing will show up among the children that you teach in various different ways and are very individual to each child. Some of the signs that you will see which indicate that all is possibly not working well with their sensory processing are mentioned in the questions that you submitted, such as constant throwing of objects when the activity is not purposeful, eating non-edible objects, meltdowns in the classroom, difficulty with noises. Other signs can show up in being over or under reactive to different sensory experiences, such as textures, movement, sounds. The child may appear clumsy, disorganized, or have difficulty engaging appropriately with their environment, peers, or tasks. Remember, each child is unique in how they present, just as each child is unique in their abilities. When I read through all the questions, a lot of them I felt were centered around how to help with what you were observing in terms of the presentation, i.e. the immediate presentation in front of you. The first thing I would advise you all is because you have a very critical role in helping our children develop good sensory processing is what I refer to as put on your sensory detective hat. So rather than trying to go in at the level of what you're observing to help the child, such as, for example, preventing the child from running around the classroom or preventing the child from throwing objects, I would like you to take a step back and consider, what is it that I want this child to be able to do on a daily basis? The single big thing that we all want our children to be able to do is to engage appropriately as per their developmental level with their environment, their peers and tasks. Next then, what does a child need to be able to engage appropriately? They need a well-regulated, organised body which is able to adapt to the tasks and the environment. How then can we help as adults? By giving the body lots of opportunities throughout the day to experience the types of body movements where they have to move their body in a way where they are using their senses to play, learn and develop. It is at this very foundation level of body movements where our children today are missing out on. Our children's lives have become so inactive compared to, say, approximately 20 years ago, with the result that so many of our children are missing out on the development of this very foundation level, which then goes on to impact so much on those higher abilities to learn and develop. So the good news is there's a lot that you as early years practitioners can do to positively impact on our young children's development of good sensory processing skills. Research indicates that providing additional sensory experiences are related to changes in behaviours, social and emotional development and motor skills. By providing ample opportunities throughout the day for engagement with appropriate types of body movements, you are helping to facilitate the young child with skills, which again can be generalised into more academic type skills, such as sitting to attend a story time, playing with peers, completing a jigsaw, etc. This is a very typical example of a child who is demonstrating very possibly the result of poor sensory processing. What I would say though is rather than looking for suggestions for safe throwing activities, I would be advising take a step back, put on your sensory detective hat. When a child is constantly throwing everything, this demonstrates very minimal engagement with the preschool activities. The throwing is not purposeful from what you say. So therefore, it's going back to look at those foundation skills for the child in terms of sensory processing. How then can you help the child better engage? He needs to have good body organization of all his senses, and this happens at that body level. So taking a step back, rather than focusing on the throwing per se, I would advise going back to basics, i.e. the body movements, and helping those become more purposeful. How then can you help? Lots of opportunities throughout the day for a program of specific body movements, where he has to learn how to move his body and adapt his body in a purposeful manner. As his body becomes better able at this level, you then might like to introduce them maybe throwing a ball to hit a target before then moving on to more academic type skills such as a small jigsaw. For all our children, the basics start with a good development of the foundation level to sensory processing, i.e. at the body movement level. When this is not functioning as it should, you will see an array of different individual needs, such as I mentioned earlier. The best advice I would give is to help all your children develop good skills at the foundation level of sensory processing. That is at the body movement level, where the body through movement is getting to experience different experiences. These body movements help the brain to process and organize the sensory processing, which then has a knock-on effect on helping the body become better organized. When the body is better organized, it is better able to regulate. And when regulated, it's better able to engage in a meaningful way with the preschool environment and tasks. I cannot stress enough how important the body movement part is to developing good sensory processing. Children need ample opportunities throughout the day for specific types of body movements in a way which helps them to learn about their senses and enable the brain to develop good networks of sensory processing, which enables them then to interact in a meaningful way throughout their preschool day and have fun. So again, sensory detective hat on. The key in your question is sensory overload, overexcited. When this happens, one's ability to remain engaged with what is going on diminishes. Frequently, when this happens for our children, we see it in behaviours such as meltdowns. Here we are seeing it in the form of tense expressions and actions. The child is trying to maintain control of their body. When that body becomes disorganized, one is no longer able to maintain a level of regulation to engage appropriately. The best thing you can do for this child is to help the child move to an area where all demands are reduced, such as a quiet area, and where one is able to engage with specific program of body movements, where one is helping their body become organized again, so helping with regulation and hence engagement. It is really fantastic that you're observing the signs which are indicating the child is no longer in control and unable to cope. By taking action, you can help the child regain control and facilitate meaningful interaction. Rather than trying to encourage the child to remain in the busy environment and try and cope, it is much better to help them to move to an area which is quiet, free of all demands, but where through body movements they can then help their own body become organized, regulated again, and better able to re-enter the preschool environment for the next set of demands, activity, etc. So for this child, I would encourage you to help develop his repertoire of tactile experiences, first via his body rather than via his mouth. Lots of opportunities for specific body movements where he's getting to experience the feel of different textures. One suggestion might be when he's crawling through a tunnel, gradually exposing him to different textures, such as crawling on his hands and knees or belly crawling over, for example, maybe bubble wrap or sandpaper, gradually building up the repertoire of different tactile experiences. It is important not to force the child, but rather to gradually expose his body to the different textures, and then this will have a knock-on effect on the rest of his processing of tactile input. Okay, so when we consider most of our classrooms, they are very busy on a number of different levels. With noise, with visual in the form of pictures, display objects, and then we have others in the classroom as well, where touch and movement. So when any of our children are no longer organised in terms of their body and where those senses need to be processed in an organised way with the brain, the result is a deregulated body-brain child who very quickly experiences overload and is no longer able to manage in their preschool environment. To expect a child to remain in that environment will only lead to behaviours such as meltdown, lashing out at others, etc. It is important to create an environment which also has a calming component to it. One suggestion might be a quiet corner which is free of all distractions, with a darkened tent, some cushions to facilitate the child to squeeze himself with, helping that body become organised again in terms of sensory processing. And if that doesn't help the child reorganize and become re-regulated again, then it's important to help the child move away from the busy environment to a quiet room, maybe indoors or outdoors, which facilitate the child then to engage in a specific program of body movements, which helps that body brain become organized again and better able to re-enter the busy environment to re-engage for another period of time.